The sun was dipping low behind the jagged mountains, casting long shadows across the dry, rocky landscape. The wind carried the scent of pine and dust, whispering through the sparse trees as if telling stories of travelers long gone. The apacha, tall and sturdy, with hands calloused from years of labor, walked along a narrow trail that led toward a small ravine. His eyes, sharp and observant, scanned the horizon for signs of movement. But what caught his attention was not the usual wildlife. It was a figure moving cautiously among the rocks. It was an Apache woman. Her dark hair braided and tied with strips of tanned leather, her eyes wary yet fierce. She carried a small bundle, likely her few belongings, and her steps were careful, measured, as if each footfall had to be calculated to avoid danger. The apacha noticed the slight limp in her step, the dust on her clothing, the faint lines of worry etched on her face. In that moment, he understood. She had been surviving on her own. In a world that had little patience for solitude, he approached her slowly, not wanting to startle her, and called out in a calm, measured voice, "You should not travel alone here. It is dangerous." She froze, her hand instinctively moving to the small knife at her belt, her gaze sharp and untrusting. But something in his tone, neither commanding nor threatening, made her pause. Slowly, she lowered her hand and met his eyes. "I can handle myself," she said, her voice steady but carrying a hint of fatigue. "I've always had to." Apache studied her for a moment. He saw strength, yes, but also resilience tempered by solitude. He saw someone who had survived harsh winters, prowling predators, and the quiet loneliness of the wilderness. And in that moment, he made a decision. "I will build you a home," he said firmly, stepping closer. "A place where you can rest, where you are safe from storms, from hunger, from danger." The woman's eyes widened slightly, caught off guard by his offer. She studied him, trying to read the truth behind the words. Most men she had met either sought something in return or underestimated her. But there was something different in his gaze, something honest, steady, and unassuming. After a long pause, she let a small smile form, a spark of her independent spirit shining through. "Let's build ours," she replied, her voice carrying a quiet defiance, but also an invitation. It was not just a counter-offer, it was a statement of partnership, of equality. She would not accept mere charity. She would contribute, shape, and claim the space as her own. The apacha felt a strange warmth at her words, a recognition that this would not be a one-sided endeavor. They would work together, combining his knowledge of construction and her wisdom of the land, to create something greater than either could accomplish alone. In her eyes, he saw determination, resourcefulness, and a spark of hope that mirrored his own. As the sun sank behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, they stood side by side at the edge of the ravine. The wind rustled through the nearby trees, carrying with it a sense of possibility, a promise of what could be built not just of timber and stone, but of trust, respect, and perhaps something deeper, unspoken, between them. And so, with the first words of their partnership spoken, the apacha and the Apache woman took their first step toward building more than just a home. They began building a shared future. One brick, one plank, one idea at a time. Morning broke with a soft glow, sunlight spilling across the valley and illuminating the rugged terrain. The apacha and the Apache woman set out together, their footsteps crunching on dry earth as they ventured into the forest. Each carried a small bundle of tools, hammers, knives, and woven baskets, and their task for the day was simple yet essential: gather the materials that would form the foundation of their home. The apacha moved with practiced efficiency, scanning the trees for the straightest logs, the sturdiest branches. His hands, rough and scarred from years of labor, tested the wood's strength, bending and tapping to ensure it could bear weight. "We need logs that won't warp or break," he said, gesturing to a cluster of tall pines. "They'll form the frame of the home. Strong, lasting, unyielding like trust." The Apache woman knelt near the underbrush, her fingers brushing the soft moss and the rough bark of smaller trees. She selected stones of varying sizes and shapes, testing their weight and texture. "These," she said, showing him a rounded, smooth rock, "will make the walls stable and the hearth safe. The fire must never be a danger to us." Her eyes gleamed with quiet determination, and the Apache felt a surge of respect for her keen judgment. As they worked side by side, a rhythm began to form. The Apache would lift and carry heavier logs, demonstrating methods for trimming and shaping them. She would follow, positioning them and securing them with ropes and leather ties. When they found large stones, she explained how to stack them in a way that balanced strength with ventilation, so the home would be both sturdy and comfortable. He listened attentively, occasionally nodding or offering suggestions, realizing that her knowledge of the land, plants, and natural materials complemented his own skills perfectly. While their hands were busy, their conversation flowed as well. The Apache spoke of the mountains he had crossed, of nights spent under the stars, of the lessons the wilderness had taught him. She spoke of her family, her journey, and the moments that had shaped her resilience. Each story built a bridge between them, a connection deeper than words alone could form. Occasionally, laughter would erupt when a log proved heavier than expected or when a stone slipped from their hands. Rolling unpredictably across the ground. By mid-afternoon, the pile of gathered logs, stones, and smaller branches had grown significantly. They paused to rest, sitting on a fallen tree, and shared a simple meal of dried meat and berries. The silence between bites was comfortable, filled with the unspoken acknowledgement of their shared effort. They were no longer two solitary travelers. They were collaborators, united by a common purpose. The Apache studied her as she examined the tools and materials, her face illuminated by the sun filtering through the branches. "You are skilled," he said softly, a rare compliment in his straightforward manner. She looked at him, her eyes narrowing slightly, a teasing smile playing on her lips. "We will be skilled together," she replied. "The home is ours, not yours alone." As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the forest floor, they began carrying their gathered materials back to the site. Each log and stone was more than just raw material, it was a piece of a future they were shaping together. With each step, the bond between them strengthened, the promise of a shared home taking form not only in the timber and stone but in the trust, respect, and quiet affection growing between them. By the time they reached the ravine where their home would rise, the air was cool and fragrant with pine. They set the materials down, surveying the pile and imagining the structure that would soon take shape. Together, they stood on the edge of possibility, ready to transform raw elements into a home, a testament to their partnership, and the beginning of something far more enduring than wood and stone. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine needles and damp earth as the Apache and the Apache woman returned to the site with the collected logs and stones. The foundation of their home awaited them, a bare patch of earth marked with rough outlines and stakes. The structure was still a vision rather than a reality, but each of them could see it taking shape in their minds. Apache stepped forward, his hands resting on the largest log they had carried. "The foundation must be strong," he said, his voice firm yet patient. "If it shifts, everything else will fall. Watch how I align these beams." He demonstrated how to place and balance the logs, explaining the importance of angles, weight distribution, and the natural bend of the wood. His movements were precise, almost ritualistic, shaped by years of experience and instinct. The Apache woman watched attentively, her dark eyes reflecting curiosity and focus. "You align the logs with your strength," she said softly. but the wind, the rain, and the sun will shape them over time. You must listen to the land, not just command it. She knelt beside a pile of smaller stones and began arranging them for the hearth and walls. Her hands moved deftly, adjusting each stone until it fit perfectly with its neighbors, creating balance and stability without forcing it. They worked side by side. A quiet conversation of gestures, corrections, and shared laughter. Apache noticed the subtle skill in her movements, the way she tested each stone, felt the grain of the wood, and observed the environment. She, in turn, studied his methods, noting the precision, the speed, and the efficiency that came from years of practice. Neither saw the other as superior. Instead, they recognized the value in combining their knowledge. At one point, a log refused to settle into place. Apache grunted and tried to lever it down with brute force, but it resisted. "Let me try," the woman said. With careful hands, she shifted a smaller stone beneath it, adjusting its angle until it finally fell into position. Apache stepped back, impressed. "You see the world differently," he said. She smiled, her eyes glinting with pride. "And yet, we can make it better together." As the day wore on, the boundaries between teacher and student blurred. They shared techniques, corrected each other gently, and learned from mistakes. Apache taught her how to lash beams together using strong leather strips, showing the knots and tensions required for durability. She taught him how to weave grasses into insulation, how to create small channels to direct rainwater away from the foundation, and which stones to avoid because they would crumble over time. Between the labor, they shared stories. He spoke of distant mountains, hunting expeditions, and the lessons the wilderness had taught him about patience and survival. She shared tales of her family, the ways her tribe had built homes that blended with the earth, and the wisdom of ancestors who had relied on observation and intuition as much as strength. Each story was a bridge, connecting their worlds and forming a foundation as strong as the one they were building with their hands. By late afternoon, the first walls of the home began to rise, not perfectly straight, but imbued with their combined effort. Their hands were scratched and calloused, their clothes dusted with earth, but neither complained. Each movement, each adjustment, each shared insight reinforced a deeper truth. The home they were building was as much about the structure as it was about the partnership forming between them. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in amber and violet, they stepped back to survey their progress. Apache nodded appreciatively, a rare smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "We learn well together," he said. She returned the smile, her pride evident. "And we will build even better tomorrow." With that, they gathered the tools, carrying them to a small stack for the night. The home was no longer just a vision. It was becoming a reality, a testament to collaboration, patience, and mutual respect. And in the quiet moments between labor and conversation, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition that they were learning more than techniques. They were learning each other. The morning began peacefully, the forest alive with birdsong and the rustling of leaves. The Apache and the Apache woman returned to the site with renewed energy, ready to continue the work they had started. The walls of their home had begun to take shape, a patchwork of logs, stones, and woven grasses, a testament to their shared skill. But nature, as always, had its own plans. By late morning, clouds began gathering over the distant mountains, dark and heavy. A faint wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of rain and the chill of an approaching storm. Apache paused, squinting at the sky. "We should secure the structure quickly," he warned. The Apache woman nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon, feeling the change in the air. Together, they moved with urgency, reinforcing logs, tightening lashings, and adjusting stones to ensure nothing would collapse in the oncoming weather. The first drops fell lightly, barely enough to wet their skin. But within minutes, the rain intensified, turning into a relentless downpour. The soil around the foundation became slick and treacherous, and the logs they had carefully placed began to shift under the weight of the water. Apache gritted his teeth, straining to hold a large beam steady, while the woman adjusted the support stones, her fingers numb from cold and wetness. "This storm is stronger than I expected," Apache said, his voice carrying over the pounding rain. The woman replied, her tone calm but firm, "We are stronger together. Focus on one piece at a time, and it will hold." Her presence was steady, a grounding force amid the chaos, and it gave him renewed determination. At one point, a log slipped, threatening to crush the partially built wall. Instinctively, Apache lunged, grabbing it with his full strength. At the same time, the Apache woman wedged a stone beneath it, distributing the weight. The beam finally settled, and for a brief moment, the two of them simply stood there, soaked to the bone, hearts racing from the near disaster. They exchanged a look, a mix of relief, pride, and unspoken admiration. The storm raged for hours, and they worked in tandem, adapting to each new challenge. Fallen branches blocked paths, water pooled around the foundation, and mud threatened to undo their careful work. Yet they persevered, improvising where necessary, learning to anticipate the elements rather than merely reacting to them. Apache marveled at her ingenuity, how she could turn a fallen branch into a brace, a pile of stones into a drainage channel. She admired his strength, precision, and ability to remain calm under pressure. Amid the struggle, small moments of humor and encouragement appeared like rays of sunlight breaking through the storm clouds. When a particularly stubborn stone refused to stay in place, she laughed despite the rain dripping into her eyes. "Even the earth is testing us," she said. Apache chuckled, a low sound that surprised him. It was rare for him to laugh in the midst of hardship. "Then we will pass the test together," he replied. As night approached, the storm finally began to ease, leaving the forest wet and glistening. They stepped back to survey the damage and the progress they had made despite nature's fury. The home was battered but intact, stronger now because of the obstacles they had overcome together. They were soaked, exhausted, and muddy, yet a sense of triumph filled the air, a quiet pride that came not from victory over the storm, but from knowing they had faced it side by side. Sitting together under a temporary shelter of woven grasses, they warmed themselves with a small fire. Their hands, scratched and wet, brushed occasionally as they passed stones or logs. In the silence that followed, a bond had deepened, a trust forged in adversity, a recognition that whatever challenges lay ahead, they could face them together. The storm had not only tested their skills, but had also revealed the strength of their partnership and the beginning of a deeper connection between them. The storm had passed, leaving the forest refreshed and fragrant, the earthy scent of rain mingling with pine and damp soil. The Apache and the Apache woman had gathered small branches and dried twigs to build a modest fire near the shelter they had created for themselves. The warmth of the flames was a welcome contrast to the chill that still clung to their clothes and skin. They sat on flat stones near the fire, their movements careful and deliberate, the silence between them heavy but comfortable. As the flames flickered, throwing shadows that danced across their faces, the Apache broke the quiet. "When I was young," he began, "I roamed the mountains beyond the valley. The nights were cold, the paths dangerous, and yet I felt alive. The wilderness was my teacher, harsh but honest." He poked at the fire with a stick, sending a small shower of sparks into the air, his eyes reflecting both the firelight and a hint of nostalgia. The Apache woman listened intently, her gaze fixed on him but her mind wandering through the images his words painted. "I know that feeling," she said softly. "When I was a child, I learned to move quietly, to read the wind and the stars, to survive without expecting anyone to help me. Strength was never a choice, it was a necessity. Her voice carried a mixture of pride and vulnerability. And for the first time, she allowed herself to reveal a piece of the hardship she had endured alone. They shared small smiles, recognizing in each other a mirrored resilience. Encouraged by his openness, the Apache continued. He told her of nights spent under the endless sky, of frozen rivers crossed and storms endured, and of the loneliness that had accompanied every challenge. She, in turn, shared stories of her family, of elders who had taught her to respect the land and to read the signs hidden in the natural world. She spoke of moments of fear, of times when she had wondered if she would survive, and of the quiet triumphs that had shaped her dot as the fire crackled and the stars began to emerge. Tiny pinpricks of light in the vast expanse above. A sense of intimacy settled between them. They were no longer just two people working together. They were two souls slowly revealing themselves, learning to trust one another with stories usually kept hidden. Each tale, each confession, was a thread weaving them closer, building an invisible structure as solid as the home they were constructing. At one point, a comfortable silence fell. The Apache looked at her, noticing the way the firelight caught the glint in her eyes. "I never thought I'd meet someone who understands the wilderness like I do," he admitted. She smiled faintly, a warmth spreading across her face. "And I never thought I'd find someone willing to build, not just a home, but a partnership," she replied. They laughed softly at the simplicity and honesty of their words. Then, as if encouraged by the night itself, they began to imagine the home they were building, not just walls and beams, but a place that reflected both of them. They spoke of what each room might hold, of the smells, the light, the sounds, and even the small comforts that made life meaningful. Their ideas overlapped and intertwined, reflecting a merging of perspectives and dreams. By the time the fire had burned down to glowing embers, a profound sense of connection lingered between them. They had shared not only stories of survival but glimpses of hope, fear, and ambition. In the quiet aftermath, each recognized the subtle truth. Their bond had grown stronger not through words alone, but through shared experiences, mutual respect, and the courage to reveal themselves to another human being. As they prepared to rest for the night, the Apache and the Apache woman felt a quiet anticipation for the days to come. Their home, like their relationship, was still in the early stages, but the foundation built from labor, trust, and shared stories was already unshakable. And in that moment, beneath the canopy of stars, they knew they were no longer alone. The following morning, the sun rose gently over the valley, casting golden light on the partially built home. Birds chirped from the treetops, and the scent of fresh earth lingered from the storm the night before. The Apache and the Apache woman returned to their site, energized and ready to continue their work, unaware that today their efforts would draw attention from the nearby community. Word of their collaboration had begun to spread. Villagers, hunters, and members of nearby tribes had noticed smoke from the fire and the steady clatter of tools over the past few days. Some were curious, others skeptical. Soon, a few neighbors approached cautiously, watching the pair from a distance, whispering among themselves. One elder stepped forward first, leaning on a gnarled staff. "Building together is a noble thing," he said, his voice measured. "But can such cooperation last? Will this home withstand not just storms, but human doubt?" The Apache woman met his gaze calmly. "This home is ours," she said firmly. "We build it with respect for the land, for each other, and for those who wish to see it thrive. Doubt cannot undo what we are creating." Apache nodded, his hand steady on a beam he was adjusting. "Strength comes from unity, not isolation. And our unity is tested in how we work, not in what others fear." Some villagers, inspired by their determination, offered assistance. A young hunter brought sturdy ropes, an elderly woman provided clay and straw for insulation, and a few others shared advice on sourcing wood resistant to the valley's harsh weather. The couple accepted help graciously but maintained their own methods, blending outside knowledge with their combined skills. Every contribution was incorporated thoughtfully, ensuring the home reflected their vision while honoring the community's guidance. Yet not everyone was pleased. A few skeptical neighbors muttered complaints, questioning whether a man and woman building together would disrupt old customs or attract trouble. Their cautious eyes followed every movement, waiting for signs of failure. The Apache and the woman ignored the murmurs, focusing instead on their work. Each glance from the doubters became an unspoken test, reinforcing the importance of patience, communication, and steadfastness in the face of judgment. During breaks, the couple engaged with the villagers, sharing techniques they had learned from each other. Apache demonstrated methods for reinforcing logs, explaining how weight distribution ensured durability. The Apache woman showed how to weave grass and reeds into the walls for insulation, and how to stack stones to create ventilation channels for smoke. Their openness gradually earned respect. Even the skeptics began to nod, recognizing skill and dedication. Through these interactions, they discovered that community was not just a source of labor, it was a network of knowledge, guidance, and support. Apache found himself listening to stories of survival and construction from elders who had built homes decades ago, while the woman learned of new materials and techniques available in the nearby settlements. Together, they synthesized these lessons, strengthening both the physical structure of their home and the social bonds that surrounded it. By evening, their home had grown significantly, standing taller and sturdier than before. The couple paused to observe their work, noticing how the structure now bore the mark of their collaboration and the subtle touches of community wisdom. As neighbors departed, some offering nods of approval, they realized that the home was no longer just a personal endeavor, it was a symbol of cooperation, respect, and the blending of skills across individuals and cultures. As they gathered near the fire to rest, Apache turned to the Apache woman, a small smile on his face. "We are stronger than we imagined," he said. She met his gaze, her own smile matching his. "Not just us," she replied, "but all who helped, who shared their knowledge, who believed or even doubted and challenged us to do better. Our home is theirs too." The night fell, and the couple sat quietly, feeling a sense of accomplishment beyond mere construction. Their bond, like their home, was growing within the framework of a larger community, and they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, storms, doubts, or unforeseen obstacles, they would face them not in isolation, but as part of a network of people who had become invested in their shared journey. The sun rose over the valley with a soft, golden light, bathing the partially completed home in warmth. The Apache and the Apache woman arrived at the site carrying tools and materials, their energy renewed by the success of yesterday's collaboration with the community. The structure now had walls that stood firm, a hearth beginning to take shape, and a foundation strong enough to withstand both the weather and time. Yet for them, it was not merely a home, they were building a dream. As they worked, they began incorporating personal touches that reflected both of their identities. Apache etched small carvings into the beam symbols representing strength, resilience, and the protection of those within. The Apache woman wove intricate patterns of reeds and grasses into the walls, designs inspired by her tribe's traditions and the natural motifs of the surrounding forest. Each detail was carefully considered, blending practicality with artistry, functionality with beauty. They paused frequently, exchanging ideas and challenging one another. "The hearth should face the east," Apache suggested, "so that the morning sun warms the home." She nodded, adding, "And the windows should allow the breeze from the river to flow through. It will keep the air fresh and cool in the heat." Their dialogue was fluid, a continuous exchange of knowledge and vision. Each compromise, each suggestion, strengthened not only the home but also the bond between them. As they worked, moments of quiet intimacy emerged naturally. When one passed a tool to the other, their fingers brushed. When one laughed at a misstep, the other joined in, the sound echoing across the valley. The act of building together became more than labor, it became a rhythm, a shared heartbeat. Each log lifted, each stone set, and each wall reinforced was infused with their growing trust and affection. They began imagining life within the home. She suggested a small nook for reading and storytelling, where they could gather herbs, cook simple meals, and share quiet moments. Apache proposed a raised platform near the hearth where they could rest and look out over the valley, watching the seasons change together. With each idea, they discussed, refined, and integrated it, creating a home that was both practical and deeply personal. A physical manifestation of their partnership. Sometimes, disagreements arose, slight differences in vision or approach, but they handled them with patience and respect. When Apache wanted to use larger stones for stability, and she preferred smaller, more flexible ones, they experimented with combinations until they found a solution that satisfied both. These moments were opportunities for compromise, teaching them not only about construction but also about understanding, negotiation, and empathy. By mid-afternoon, the home had grown into a cohesive, welcoming structure. The walls were strong, the hearth solid, and small windows framed views of the surrounding forest and mountains. Together they added final touches: a carved doorway, woven mats for comfort, and small decorative stones along the foundation. Every addition reflected both their contributions, their collaboration, and their shared dreams. As they stepped back to admire their work, the Apache looked at the woman with genuine admiration. "It is more than I imagined," he said. She smiled, her eyes reflecting both pride and warmth. "It is ours," she replied, "built with care, with patience, with dreams we both hold." The sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across their creation. The home stood not just as a shelter, but as a symbol of unity, creativity, and shared ambition. They realized that the process of building had not only created a place to live, but had also forged a connection that was far stronger than they had anticipated. As they sat near the hearth, enjoying a simple meal of bread and dried fruit, they spoke quietly about the future. "This is only the beginning," Apache said. She nodded, her hand resting on the warm stone. "Yes, we will continue to build not just the home, but everything we hope for together." The evening air was filled with the quiet contentment of achievement, the thrill of dreams shared, and the promise of a life built side by side. The home was taking shape, strong and steady. Yet the evening brought a quiet stillness that contrasted sharply with the day's labor. The Apache and the Apache woman had finished reinforcing the walls, securing the roof, and adjusting the hearth. The air was cool, scented with pine and the faint smoke of their small fire. They sat together near the hearth, sharing a modest meal of roasted roots and dried meat, the quiet punctuated only by the crackling flames. For a long while, neither spoke. Their glances met occasionally, a subtle acknowledgment of the trust that had grown between them. Apache stirred the fire with a stick, sending sparks dancing into the night sky, and finally spoke in a voice softer than usual. "I faced many storms," he began, "but some I could not prepare for. Some I faced alone." He paused, as if weighing whether to continue. The Apache woman looked at him attentively, sensing that this was a rare confession. "I lost my younger brother when I was just a boy," he said quietly. "We were crossing a mountain trail, and a landslide came without warning. I tried to save him, but I could not. I carry that memory with me every day. His eyes, usually so steady and unyielding, softened, revealing the depth of pain he rarely shared. The Apache woman reached out, her hand resting briefly on his arm, not as a comfort, but as recognition. Her own voice carried a tremor she rarely allowed. "I understand loss," she said. "When I was a child, my parents were taken in a raid. I survived, but the fear, the emptiness, it never leaves you. You learn to rely on yourself, and yet, even in solitude, the ache remains." For a moment, they sat in silence, each absorbing the other's pain. There was no need for words, just the shared understanding of scars that shaped their lives. In that quiet, vulnerability became a bridge rather than a barrier, a channel through which trust and empathy flowed freely. Apache finally spoke again, his tone lighter, though tinged with lingering sorrow. "I never thought I'd meet someone who could understand the wilderness, the dangers, the loneliness, and still see hope." She smiled faintly, a small wistful curve of her lips. "And I never thought I'd meet someone who carries pain so openly yet still chooses to build, to create, to trust." Their hands found each other, fingers intertwining naturally, as if this simple gesture could anchor them in the uncertainty of life. In that moment, the Apache realized that the home they were building was not only a shelter from the elements, but also a safe space for sharing burdens, fears, and dreams. And the Apache woman understood that trust could be given without surrendering independence. That connection did not mean weakness. They spoke long into the night, not only of past losses but also of hopes for the future. Apache confessed his wish to create a place where people could feel safe, not just physically but emotionally, a place where mistakes could be forgiven and courage nurtured. She shared her desire to blend tradition with innovation, to honor her heritage while embracing new possibilities. By the time the stars shone brightly above, they had woven their vulnerabilities into a tapestry of mutual respect and understanding. The home around them, sturdy and warm, became a silent witness to their honesty. What had begun as labor and collaboration had evolved into a bond fortified by trust and empathy. As they settled to rest, the fire dwindling to glowing embers, the Apache spoke softly, almost to himself. "Together, we can face anything." She nodded, resting her head near his shoulder. "Yes, together." The night wrapped them in its quiet embrace, and for the first time in a long while, both felt truly seen, understood, and ready to continue building not just their home, but their life together. The morning sun cast a golden glow across the valley, illuminating the home that Apache and the Apache woman had labored over for weeks. The walls stood firm, the roof solid and weatherproof, and the hearth, carefully constructed from stones they had selected together, promised warmth in even the coldest nights. Every plank, every stone, every woven detail carried the mark of their hands, their vision, and their shared effort. They arrived at the site with a sense of quiet anticipation. Today, no logs needed trimming, no stones needed adjusting. Today, the home would finally stand complete. The Apache ran his hand along the polished surface of the doorway, tracing the carvings that symbolized protection, resilience, and the harmony they had created together. The Apache woman added the final touches to the woven grass panels, ensuring that the patterns reflected her heritage while complementing the structure as a whole. Standing back, they surveyed the home from the clearing. It was more than a shelter, it was a manifestation of dreams, collaboration, and love. The firelight from the previous night now seemed to linger in the warmth of the walls themselves. Every beam and stone carried the memory of shared labor, laughter, arguments, problem-solving, and moments of vulnerability. The home had become an extension of them, embodying both strength and tenderness. Apache turned to the woman, his eyes reflecting admiration and gratitude. "We did it," he said simply. His words carried the weight of triumph not only over the physical labor, but over the doubts, challenges, and fears that had accompanied them throughout the journey. She smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face, her gaze sweeping over the home with quiet pride. "We did it together," she replied. "Every part of this belongs to both of us." They walked through the home, examining each room and corner. The hearth was perfectly positioned to catch the morning sun. The small windows framed breathtaking views of the valley and forest, and the woven mats and decorations added comfort and personality. Apache placed a small carved emblem above the entrance, a symbol of unity, while she hung a woven charm nearby, representing protection and hope. Together, these elements made the home a reflection of their partnership, a physical testament to what could be built when two people worked side by side with respect, creativity, and love. As they stepped outside, they noticed the subtle changes in the clearing, the flattened earth where they had worked tirelessly, the stones arranged to guide rainwater, and even the small saplings they had planted to provide future shade and beauty. Everything around the home seemed infused with their presence, their decisions, and their shared history over the past weeks. Apache extended his hand toward her, a simple gesture that carried layers of meaning. "This home is not the end," he said softly. "It is the beginning." She took his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Yes," she agreed. "A beginning built on trust, effort, and dreams we both share." The sun climbed higher, casting warmth over the valley and the home that now stood as a symbol of their journey. Neighbors who had watched their progress arrived to see the completed structure. They offered smiles, quiet praise, and gestures of admiration. The couple accepted these with grace, knowing that while the community had offered guidance and materials, the home's soul, the essence that made it truly theirs, was born from their unity and dedication. As evening fell, they lit a fire inside the hearth, the flames reflecting off the walls they had built together. Sitting side by side, they felt the culmination of effort, vision, and emotion settling around them like a protective embrace. The home, solid and warm, stood not just as a shelter from storms, but as a monument to partnership, resilience, and the promise of a shared future. For the first time, they truly understood the meaning of building together. Not just walls and beams, not just hearths and mats, but a life, a dream, and a bond strong enough to endure whatever storms might come next. And as they watched the sun dip behind the mountains, the home glowed softly in the fading light, a perfect reflection of all they had. Built together. The first light of dawn filtered through the small windows of the completed home, painting the walls in soft hues of amber and gold. Outside, the valley was quiet, the forest still damp from the previous storms, and the scent of pine and fresh earth filled the air. Inside, the Apache and the Apache woman stirred, waking not just in a new day, but in a new chapter of their lives. The home around them was no longer just a construction of logs, stones, and woven grasses. It was a sanctuary. Every detail, from the carved doorway to the carefully placed hearth, reflected their shared vision, effort, and dreams. The warmth of the fire from the night before lingered faintly, as if holding on to the energy of their collaboration, whispering promises of safety, comfort, and new beginnings. Apache rose first, stretching and taking in the sight of their home bathed in morning light. He moved quietly to the hearth, adding kindling to the remaining embers, ensuring a small fire would greet them as the day began. The Apache woman joined him, her fingers brushing his as she handed him a small bundle of wood. Their gestures were simple, unspoken acknowledgments of partnership, familiarity, and the bond that had deepened over countless hours of work and shared experience. They stepped outside together, feeling the cool morning air on their skin. The valley stretched out before them, serene and expansive, yet alive with the potential of the unknown. Birds called from the trees, and the soft rustle of leaves created a gentle soundtrack to their moment of reflection. Apache looked at the woman, noticing how the light highlighted her features, the strength in her eyes, the determination in her posture, and the warmth in her smile. "We built more than a home," he said softly. "We built a life." She nodded, a quiet contentment settling over her. "Yes," she replied. "A home is just the beginning. What comes next? That is ours to create together." The words carried a weight of promise, of openness to whatever adventures and challenges lay ahead. They knew that life would not always be easy, that storms, both literal and metaphorical, would inevitably come. But the foundation they had built, both in the home and in their relationship, was unshakable. They spent the morning exploring their home as if seeing it anew. Each corner, each detail, told a story of shared labor, laughter, and compromise. The hearth, now fully functional, held a pot of boiling water for tea, while the small nook she had suggested seemed perfect for reflection and storytelling. Together, they walked around the perimeter, inspecting the stones, the logs, and the carefully woven grass panels. Everything was exactly as it should be, a reflection of harmony and collaboration.